Welcome to Crispy Girl Flix, Johnnyman.
The opening sequence is accompanied by a beautiful classical score, and it depicts the toils of construction workers repairing a wing of a modern Istanbul hospital. The weather is cold and cloudy, so the workers wear old jeans, sweaters, vests, and scarves. Their actions are presented in a slow-motion montage. They carry sand and beams, and later sit down to eat. It suddenly starts raining. The next scene is located inside the hospital, where a doctor is dressing the wound around Layla's ear. He tells her that the wound isn't too serious and gives her an ointment, instructing her to apply it regularly. Layla is an attractive young woman with black hair and dark eyes. She is visibly distressed and shaken as she receives the treatment, with tears streaming down her chin. The doctor asks her whether he should contact the authorities and inform them about the incident. However, Layla just looks him in the eye and silently shakes her head. She's still crying as she fixes her hair in the hospital bathroom. The hallway is crowded as she walks towards the exit, with doctors and visitors moving in various directions. Nurses are pushing wheeled hospital beds with elderly patients, and a panic-stricken running man with a fainted child in his arms bumps into Layla. She exits through the revolving door and gets in a cab, but suddenly realizes that she forgot her purse. She apologizes and asks the driver to wait while she retrieves it. She hurries to the bathroom and is relieved to see that no one has stolen her purse. She picks it up and hurries back, but the cab leaves before she manages to get through the revolving door. She starts banging on the glass and shouting at the driver, but to no avail. In the meanwhile, a handsome young man in work clothes comes behind Layla and touches her with his tool belt. She turns around in fear and stares into his face. The man has a serious expression and regards her with curiosity. Supposedly traumatized by the event which led to her injury, Layla seems distressed by the man's proximity and lets out a loud and prolonged shriek which alarms the people inside the hospital. However, the man remains unperturbed and simply raises his eyebrows. He moves closer still and lifts his arm, seemingly to comfort Layla, but actually to push open the door. Layla calms down and hurriedly walks outside. She goes to her left, but immediately changes her mind and turns in the opposite direction. She looks back at the worker who stands idly by the door and angrily tells him to stop staring. He smiles and continues to watch her, while a few of the workers seen in the opening sequence approach him and offer him a pastry. He takes a bite and silently walks away with the other workers. The following scene takes place in a snowy yard. A middle-aged woman opens the front door of her house to greet her two little kids who are returning from school. The little boy and girl run towards the door, dressed in warm winter clothes, and tell her that a woman is waiting at the gate. The woman asks Layla who she came to see, and Layla awkwardly approaches and asks if her name is Chalin, which the woman confirms. She notices the little children watching her from the window, which aggravates her already difficult task. She's ashamed to admit that she's been having an affair with Chalin's husband, which lasted for a year. She expresses sincere regret for her actions and assures her that she didn't know he was married. She apologizes repeatedly and shows her the wound by her ear, telling her that Chalin's husband inflicted it when she tried to break off the relationship after finally learning the truth. Chalin seems deeply saddened by this unsettling revelation and silently watches her leave. The bell rings while Layla's mother, Melissa, is watering plants, and she goes to open the door. Layla initially stands with her back at the door and slowly turns to look at her mother. Her mother is surprised to see her, but she's also happy that her daughter has come back. Layla sits crying on the bed in her old room. The walls are adorned with photos from her baby days, and there's a framed photograph on the nightstand which shows Layla and her younger sister kissing their father, Sam, on each cheek. Her mother comes to comfort her, bringing her an aspirin. She tells her that the past is behind them, and assuages her fear that Sam won't forgive her for what she's done. Layla's sister, Daphne, brings her a glass of water. After a certain while the family awkwardly eats lunch, with nobody saying a word. Layla's mother pointedly gazes at her husband, wordlessly imploring him to break his silence and accept Layla back into their home. He remains silent as Layla passes him the salt and quietly chews his food with a hardened expression. Layla finally breaks down. She gets up to embrace him and repeatedly begs his forgiveness. Her father is surprised by this action, but her words aren't enough to win him over. His expression changes and shows that he deeply cares for his daughter. However, it also shows that she's hurt him too deeply for him to be able to forgive her so easily. He suddenly gets up, takes his jacket from the chair, and walks out in the snow. The three women also go out, and Layla bellows yet again. She runs to her father who stands in the snow and touches his hand. She begs him not to become yet another man who's destroyed her life and assures him that she didn't know what she was getting into. Her father stares into the distance and states that he can't forgive her because she brought him deep shame by trampling on his honor. Layla says that she would understand and accept his decision to move out of the house, but repeats her plea to be forgiven. The passage of time is presented with a beautiful montage of the weather changing. The snow in the yard melts, and after the rain and sunshine, it's snowing once again. Sam is standing in front of a dressing mirror, trying out a suit tailored by his daughter. He congratulates her on her work, and Layla says that he can finally stop spending money on new suits. He looks at Layla with fatherly pride, seemingly satisfied with his decision to forgive her transgressions, and accept her back into his heart. Layla happily smiles and embraces Sam, and they go out to lunch. However, Sam first needs to stop by the construction site, where he oversees the work of the carpenters. The workers are arguing over the dampness of the planks, and the man who bumped into Layla at the hospital tells Sam that he's the leader of the team and that his name is Alexander. Meanwhile, as she's waiting in the car, Layla receives a call from her friend Ural. He's upset because the carpenter he hired left before finishing the job, and he needs to get the shop ready. Layla promises to help him. She and her father get on a construction lift from which she sees Alexander smoking a cigarette, but she doesn't seem to remember him from their encounter at the hospital. Ural is still anxious over his predicament, but Layla assures him that her father sent the best carpenter on his team. However, she repeats Sam's warning that the man has a violent temper. Alexander's arrival is depicted in slow motion, with both Layla and Ural watching him in awe. Ural offers him tea, but Alexander immediately gets to work by dismantling the shelves which Ural nailed on his own. He tells him that his work wasn't good and that he needs to start from scratch. After a certain while, Layla is going towards the building's exit. Her radiant mood vanishes when she realizes that she can't get through the glass door, and she's startled to see Alexander, who has once again sidled behind her. In a reprise of the hospital scene, Alexander lifts his arm behind Layla and opens the door. Alexander waves at Layla as he's getting in his truck, and she waves back from the side of the road. A biker dressed in black suddenly wheezes by and steals her purse. Alexander starts the truck and hits the motorcycle after a quick chase. The rider lands in the back of his truck, and the distraught Layla goes to collect her purse. The rider runs away, and Alexander goes to Layla and asks her if she's alright, and how she's planning to get home. She tells him that she'll wait for a bus, but the next scene shows her in the passenger seat of the truck. She apologizes for yelling at Alexander at the hospital, but he tells her not to worry. She doesn't seem to mind his company, although she's frustrated by his quiet manner. The weather is cold, so Alexander gives her a blanket. She wraps herself in the blanket, and Alexander tells her to keep it when they arrive at her house. A romantic Latino song plays over this scene, underscoring Layla and Alexander's chemistry. Later on, Layla sneaks at the construction site to spy on Alexander. She inadvertently bumps into a worker carrying a sack full of plaster, which spills over her face. In the evening, she takes 3 of her girlfriends to a shabby food kiosk. They all want to leave, but Layla insists that they must stay because the builders always eat there. The workers finally arrive, and one of Layla's friends quickly dismisses them as mere peasants. Layla is afraid to talk to Alexander, but she finally summons the courage to face him and tell him that she should return his blanket. He invites her to sit with him, and the other workers are happy to join Layla's friends. Layla's friends start teasing Alexander, telling him to propose, but his friends tell them that he doesn't want to marry because he wants to keep his money for himself. Layla's friend points out that Layla is the daughter of their boss, and everyone laughs. Layla sits quietly next to Alexander. They're holding hands, and she rests her head on his shoulder. Alexander pours an alcoholic beverage, but Layla says that she doesn't drink. Alexander promises to become her lover if she takes the drink. However, if she doesn't, he'll remain a stranger. Layla quickly downs the cup, and Alexander finally kisses her. Alexander goes to the barber before their first date, and the barber gives him a special cologne. Alexander and Layla go to a 3D cinema, then to a bar where he teaches her to play pool. They kiss and laugh in the snow, and later go to an aquarium. Layla worries that the fishes will surely get bored behind the glass, but Alexander comforts her by saying they have a short memory. They spend the night at Alexander's. He spends most of his time in a workshop, but there's a caravan truck outside. He says that he'll move back in there once it's repaired. Layla sings a song from the Black Sea region, where she grew up. Alexander enjoys her performance but doesn't tell her where he was born and hides a small sculpture of a female figure. Layla notices a photograph of Alexander with an older man and asks if he is his grandfather. Alexander responds that he used to be his apprentice and tells her that he doesn't have any other pictures. Layla says that the smell of Alexander's cologne brings her peace because it reminds her of her childhood. Alexander tells her that it was supplied by his barber and that from now on the smell will remind her of Alexander. She gently taps his back while they're embracing, telling him that she's writing something, but doesn't reveal the content of the message. Layla tailors a suit for Alexander, which she tries on Ural. He expresses his frustration over the incessant modeling, as well as his inability to comprehend women's attraction to boorish men like Alexander. Alexander finds the clothes in his truck, along with a note instructing him to think of Layla whenever he wears them. Sam notices Layla's radiance as the family eats dinner, and wants to know her boyfriend's name. Layla initially denies the accusation, but Sam persists, and says that he wants to meet the man. Layla looks angrily at Daphne, but her sister silently proclaims her innocence in the matter. Layla tells Sam that their relationship hasn't yet arrived at that stage. Sam asks what the man does for a living, and Layla replies that he's an architect. Sam states his suspicion. He thought that Layla's boyfriend was a construction worker. Daphne spits out her drink and runs out of the room. Layla frequently visits the construction site and urges Alexander to meet her father and marry her. Alexander repeatedly rejects this notion, saying that he's always lived alone and that he doesn't believe in everlasting love. Layla doesn't give up and gets angry at his attitude. Alexander finally breaks down and tells her about his difficult childhood. His family left him on the streets, and he's afraid that she will also leave him after they get married. He tells her that she's unaware of how difficult life can get, and gets up to hug her. Meanwhile, the construction lift arrives at their platform, and it's too late to let her go. Sam finally learns the true identity of his daughter's lover. Layla's parents speak with Alexander in Sam's office while she waits outside. Sam admonishes Alexander for thinking he could have a casual relationship with his daughter. He asks him where he resides and whether he introduced her to his parents. Alexander doesn't say a word and finally admits that he's unworthy of being Layla's lover. Sam fires him and urges him to break up with Layla. Layla's anxiety suddenly causes her to faint, and Alexander runs out of the barrack and lifts her in his arms. They take her to a hospital, and the doctors tell them that she fainted because of stress and anemia. As soon as she regains her conscience, Layla tears up and promises Alexander that she will never leave him. Sam is touched by this display, realizing that they really do love each other and that Layla will only be happy if she is with Alexander. The couple finally gets married. Sam leads Layla down the stairs with a big smile on his face, and Melissa and Daphne are also happy to see Layla and Alexander wed. All of their friends who ate at the food kiosk are also present, but Alexander hasn't invited any relatives. Layla moves in with Alexander. He goes to the bathroom and slips on the floor because Layla wanted to take a bath, but forgot to turn off the water. They get in the bath, fully clothed, and Layla starts typing on his forehead. He asks her what she's writing, but she doesn't tell him. Alexander laughs and kisses her. Sam introduces Alexander to an investor building a holiday resort, and his team is assigned to the job. Layla also advances in her career. She's happy to hear Alexander's news but has to hang up to see the models who are promoting her clothes. The happy couple's home is adorned with wedding photographs. Layla wakes her husband up early in the morning, unable to contain her laughter. The other workers also laugh when they see Alexander's face. Layla drew flowers on his cheeks and wrote Layla's property on his forehead while he was sleeping. Layla sits in front of the window with a vacant stare. Her co-workers tell her to move away from the cold and leave her purse on the table. She replies that it's better to hold onto it because she always forgets it, and later complains that her arm feels numb. During the following days, Alexander finds her wandering near the construction site in a confused state. She decides to see a psychiatrist and tells him that she's anemic and occasionally faints. She elaborates that she fainted when she found out that the man she was seeing was actually married. The psychiatrist assumes her condition to be based on stress, but tells her to come back after a week to do some tests. A middle-aged woman comes to see Alexander at the construction site. She desperately needs money and promises to never ask for anything from him again. Alexander takes Layla to a secluded place near a lake where he starts envisioning the rooms of their future home. He starts listing the vegetables growing in their future garden, but stops in his tracks when he sees Layla lying on the ground. He rushes toward her, thinking that she's fainted yet again. However, as it turns out, Layla simply designated the spot as the location of their future bedroom. She thanks him for making her so happy, and says that she can't wait to see him living in a proper home. Alexander looks lovingly into her eyes and tells her that she is his home. After a few days, Alexander introduces Layla to the old man she saw in the photograph. He describes him as a father figure who taught him everything there was to know about carpentry and life in general. However, the man was a stern teacher who always demanded more and struck his hands whenever he made a mistake. Alexander gives him a cane and presents Layla as his wife. The old man berates him for not bringing Layla before she married her, and he's also unhappy with the rough edges of the cane. He orders him to sandpaper the cane, and Alexander leaves Layla with the old man. Layla is surprised to learn that Alexander's mother is still alive, and the old man urges her to deliver him from the hatred he feels toward her because she left him while he was very young. He tells her that her name is Zoe, and she stays in a hotel in a shabby district. Layla manages to find her room, but she's greeted by a deeply unsettling scene. A scary-looking man with a glass eye and unkempt hair is beating up Zoe because she owes him money. The man starts chasing after Layla, but she outruns him from the hotel and immediately gets in a cab. Layla calls Alexander to the hospital, and he's surprised to see his mother in her terrible state. Layla urges him to let go of his hatred and help his mother in her time of need. But Alexander replies that he doesn't have a mother and that Layla is his only family. He doesn't want to give away the money he saved for his future with Layla to a woman that left him on the streets when he was 5. He tells her that he couldn't stop crying when she left him, and he swore never to cry again. Still, Layla wants him to overcome his anger and help his mother. Alexander goes to his mother's side, and she tells him that she understands his hatred for stealing his childhood, but states that she also lost her childhood because of him. She was too young when she gave birth to him, and wishes that she never did and that she herself was never born. Alexander tries to hold her hand, but Zoe tells him to leave her alone. Alexander finds the man with the glass eye, attacks him, and asks how much money he's owed. In the evening, he and Layla go to the same food kiosk. and Alexander tells her that they lost their future home. Layla reminds him of what he said before, that Layla was his home. Layla pours an alcoholic drink, but Alexander doesn't feel like drinking. Layla tells him that they'll remain happy for the rest of their lives if he drinks it, and Alexander obliges her. Layla's psychiatrist berates her for coming back after 3 weeks. He asks about her family, and she's unsure about her sister's age. He further asks if she's often losing or forgetting things, and puts her through various tests. Layla's previous lover and co-worker, Mehmet, comes to see her in her office. He divorced his wife and moved to London, but accepted the offer to return to his previous position in order to apologize for everything he put her through. He tells her that she fainted and hurt her ear when she found out that he was married. But Layla tells him that she forgot everything and walks out of the room. Layla is behaving strangely in her home as her forgetfulness increases. Alexander asks her what the doctor said, and she tells him that she should go back in a week. Gradually shifting in tone, the film's difficult subject matter comes into full effect in the next scene, as Layla's following visit to the psychiatrist brings her extremely devastating news. He regrets to inform her that she suffers from a rare type of dementia, which is the cause of her attacks, occasional numbness and confused state. He tells her to quit her job and take every opportunity to rest because the disease will progress rapidly and cause her to forget her loved ones, and even how to put on clothes. Eventually, her mind will desert her before the actual physical death occurs. Layla is unable to cope with this revelation, and can't bring herself to tell Alexander. She asks him if she should quit her job, and Alexander tells her that he can provide for her. Layla prepares him lunch, and the other workers are envious of Alexander because he has a wife who cooks for him while they eat cheap food from the kiosk. However, Layla mistakenly filled both bowls with rice, and Alexander realizes that something's terribly wrong. He attacks her doctor and urges him to recognize that he's made a mistake. But Layla's psychiatrist tells him that there was nothing wrong with the tests, and that he's been researching the disease ever since he lost his wife to it. He advises him to prepare for the harsh reality that awaits them. Mehmet asks Layla if she's quitting her job because he came back, and tells her that he wants everything to go back to the way it was. Layla greets him with a hug, thinking they're still together, but her memory suddenly comes back when she sees her all standing at the door. She quickly walks away in distress. Alexander finds Layla in the bar where he taught her how to play pool. She tells him that there's an eraser in her mind that gradually clears away all of her memories. She says that she'll forget everything about him and thinks that it would be easier if they separate now. Alexander doesn't agree and promises that he'll remember, for the both of them. She insists that she'll also forget everything about herself, but he assures her that he'll always know who she is. He tears up as they kiss, and Layla sees him crying for the first time. Alexander moves the knives away and puts labels on the photographs in their home so that Layla doesn't forget her loved ones. He asks her what their names are and when they got married, and she seems to remember everything. Layla is unable to open her pill bottle after Alexander goes to work, and suffers a memory lapse when she takes the knife from a higher shelf. A few moments later, Mehmet knocks on the door, bringing her the things she forgot at work and wanting to discuss their relationship. Layla mistakes him for her husband and offers to make him coffee, but Mehmet is afraid that her real husband will come back. Alexander does return and watches their embrace from the door. He lunges at Mehmet and beats him savagely. Layla doesn't recognize Alexander and attacks him with the knife. He pushes her back and she collapses on the couch. He resumes his attack on Mehmet, who's passed out from the beating. But Layla's family and Alexander's mother and old master arrive on the scene. Sam doesn't understand why Layla didn't tell them about his condition, and tells Alexander to leave her in their care and move on with his life as he is still young. Alexander insists that he's the one who should look after his wife. Layla suddenly comes out of her room and starts urinating on her legs. Her mother gasps, and Alexander rushes her to the bathroom. He cleans her while her mother begs to be let in, and Alexander starts crying in Layla's lap. Alexander and Layla go by the lake and resume the planning of their future home. However, as they're getting in the truck, Layla mistakenly calls him Mehmet, and he doesn't correct her. She tells him that she loves him, and Alexander says that he loves her too. Sam and Alexander speak with the psychiatrist, who tells them to remain strong and keep Layla away from potentially stressful situations. He states that the latest memories will be the first to go, but that eventually the old ones will vanish as well. Alexander relates how she addressed him as Mehmet, and wonders who she actually loves. Layla touches Alexander's gloves while he's at work, and suddenly remembers everything that's happened. She remembers how they met and everything they went through, including the pain she caused him. She writes him a long letter in which she apologizes for hurting him, and tells him that she has to leave because of her deteriorating state, although he'll always have a place in her heart and she never loved anyone else. Alexander is devastated when he returns to find an empty home and doesn't think he'll be able to carry on without Layla. He tells this to her family and tears up the divorce papers. Melissa and Daphne are sympathetic to his plight, but Sam tells him that he sent her to America, where she can receive the best care, and again urges him to move on. Sam tells the unresponsive Layla that she was his firstborn child and that he'll always remain remain by her side. He remembers several heartwarming scenes from her childhood when she urged him to stay. He embraces her, starts weeping, and begs her not to go away. Alexander angrily destroys his living room, and suddenly hears a child crying on the street. The child is actually an illusion of his 5-year-old self, after his mother left him all alone. He takes a plank and swings at the illusion, finally breaking free from the pain of his past and fulfilling Layla's wish. He starts repairing the caravan truck and soon moves by the lake with his mother, who's happy to be reunited with her estranged son. Daphne comes in a cab, and she tells Alexander that he needs to see Layla. She's been in Istanbul all along, and Daphne couldn't tell him because she was afraid of her father. She found a letter in her hand, which she addressed to Alexander but forgot to send. Alexander embraces Daphne. Layla wrote that she managed to remember their entire relationship and that he was a good husband, but he needs to find a new love and stop worrying about her. Alexander gets in the truck and puts on the cologne the barber gave him. Melissa lets him see her daughter, who's lying in bed serenely in a quiet room. He slowly takes her hand and touches her face, and after a while, Layla finally recognizes her husband. He kisses her repeatedly and tells her to let go of her fear, because he's come to take her home and he will never leave her. He takes her in his arms and walks out of the house, while Sam, Melissa, and Daphne watch them from the door. Layla remembers the song she sang after their first date, as well as how they met and how they got married, and suddenly gives up the ghost as she's looking at Alexander. Everyone starts crying in anguish, including Zoe, who followed her son to the house. Alexander embraces Layla for the last time, crying because she failed to keep her promise that she will never leave him. Layla is buried by the lake near Alexander's home, at the spot where they were planning to erect their home. He remembers what she told him in the bathtub when she was typing on his forehead. She wrote that she wanted to stay with him for the rest of her life, and later promised that, if he wants, she'll stay with him even after death. The film is dedicated to those who still believe in love. Do you think the story successfully merges the lighter scenes with its serious overarching themes, or maybe certain aspects could have been better explored? Was Sam right, at least to a certain extent, when he advised Alexander to move on with his life? Also, did he really have to lie about sending Layla to America? Finally, did Alexander's mother deserve to be forgiven?